Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 players to let your idiot league mates draft in 2024 fantasy football. 5 players that I am currently avoiding based upon their current average draft positions. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure they do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get in to today's video. We begin with the first player to let your idiot league mates draft in 2024 fantasy football, and that is Davante Adams, wide receiver of the Las Vegas Raiders. Current aggregate ADP from ESPN, Sleeper, MFL, NFFC, and Fantrax, wide receiver 10 at pick 17. Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 15 off of the board at pick 20.2. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear that I still believe that Davante Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. If you can transport him from the Raiders, throw him onto a different offense, then I would be sitting here giving the Gawk 9000 special to Davante Adams, because I believe in other situations this guy has the upside to slice defenses in half Wolverine style. The problem lies not with Davante Adams' skill set. I understand that Davante Adams is 1 year older and people start to panic once wide receivers get a little bit older, but the age does not concern me. What concerns me is the Las Vegas Raiders offense. For one, their offensive philosophy under head coach Pierce is to run the ever-living shit out of the ball, to jam the ball down the throat of the defense's smash mouth football. That is the goal of the team. I understand they no longer have Josh Jacobs, but with Zamir White and friends, the goal of this offense is to run the ball a ton with a scheme that Pierce came up with that was relatively effective towards the end of last season with Zamir White. Now, obviously, when you are an offense like the Raiders, that is not going to be one of the best in the National Football League. Eventually, at some point, you are going to be getting nailed from the back and you're going to have to throw the ball. And Davante Adams is probably going to average around 10 targets per game. But how good are those targets really going to be from either Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew? Now, I understand Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G-Spot, Jimmy Pornstar was far from ideal for a majority of last season, but it's not like Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell are the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. Like, it is going to make a huge difference. Davante Adams last year was the wide receiver 10 in PPR and the wide receiver 15 in PPR points per game, tied with Brandon Ayuk and Michael Pittman Jr. He had 175 targets in 17 games, 10.3 per game ranking, second at wide receiver, 103 receptions, ninth at wide receiver, 6.1 per game, 1,144 receiving yards, 67.3 per game, 15th at wide receiver, and 8 total touchdowns, 11th, ranking 8th in terms of dominator rating, and 1st in terms of unrealized air yards. Davante Adams can very clearly still play ball. But what are the odds that Davante Adams ends up burning me if I avoid him? Meaning, if I am in 10 fantasy leagues and I avoid Davante Adams in a majority of them, I don't think that Davante Adams is going to burn me in a huge way. He's coming off the board as the wide receiver 10, and I think more than likely he finishes in the range of wide receiver 12 through 15 or 16. I don't think that Davante Adams is going to be some colossal bust, Krakatoa of large magnitude, but I just don't think in Las Vegas he really has that upside to be a league winner for you, to be one of the top wide receivers in fantasy football. Again, this is a team under Pierce that wants to run the ball at an incredibly high clip. I get Gardner Minshew might be slightly better than Aiden O'Connell, but again, at the end of the day, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew aren't going to be Aaron Rodgers. Now, there is still that looming possibility that Davante Adams gets traded elsewhere, and if that does end up happening, then my take is going to change in a big way because I would be a lot more confident on a different team. But as of right now, it doesn't really feel like that is going to happen. And while I will be cheering for Davante Adams this season because I've been a fan of Davante Adams for a very long time, at the end of the day, as the wide receiver number 10, that feels too rich for me. To me, if he was coming off the board closer to wide receiver 15 like he is on Underdog Fantasy, it makes a little bit more sense. But as the wide receiver 10, with the guy I see finishing somewhere from wide receiver 12 to 15, frankly, I am not going to be pulling the trigger a ton on Davante Adams. Again, I don't think he's washed. I just do not love the situation. At number 2, we've got Sir Kenneth Walker III, running back of the Seattle Seahawks, aggregate ADP running back 17 at pick 52, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 16 at pick 68.9. Just like with Davante Adams, I do not believe that Kenneth Walker is, by any sense of the imagination, a bad player. Now, comparing Davante Adams to Kenneth Walker is kind of like comparing apples to oranges because, again, I really do believe Davante Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the league. I don't think Kenneth Walker is one of the premier running backs in the league, but he's also not a two-pack of ass, right? There are definitely a bunch of teams in the NFL that would love to have Kenneth Walker be their lead back. But as the running back 17 off the board, what is the upside of Kenneth Walker? What is the best finish he could get? To me, he could finish as a high-end RB2 or maybe a low-end running back 1, meaning he finishes maybe as the running back 10 through the running back 16, 17, 18. And in my opinion, it's more likely that he's probably anywhere from the running back 14 to the running back 18 or 20 by the end of the season. And that is because, for one, the Seattle Seahawks have one of the worst offensive lines in all of the National Football League. They rank 31st, so the second worst offensive line according to PFF, which I trust. And even if you're like, oh, Nick, they're actually the 29th best offensive line, who gives a shit at that point, right? They are not very good at all. And they might even be worse than they were last season, and it was a disaster last year. Kenneth Walker is in a situation where the upside is low for him because of the fact that while the team has made a lot of points towards wanting to run the football, I do not see Kenneth Walker being a workhorse back on this team. I think they're going to use Walker and they're going to use Zach Charbonnet, and there is good reason to believe that Kenneth Walker will be taken off the field on third down because Zach Charbonnet is a better pass-catching back. Kenneth Walker last year played in 15 games, and he finished as the running back 19 in PPR, running back 20 in PPR points per game. He had 219 carries, ranking 15th at running back, 14.6 per game, 905 rushing yards, 19th at running back, 60.3 per game, 37 targets, ranking 35th, 29 receptions, 34th, 259 receiving yards, 21st, and 9 total touchdowns, 12th. Kenneth Walker is a running back that is very frustrating to watch, in my opinion, because it really feels like every single touch is all or nothing. He is either going to juke a defender out of their cleats, he is going to run a circle around a couple of guys, do that like Bo Jackson glitch from back in the Tecmo Bowl, where you could just run all around and you can't be stopped, and then he's going to do-si-do into the fucking end zone for a 60-yard touchdown. He's either going to do that or there is going to be 4 men around him tackling him within half of a second of getting the ball, and he loses 3 yards. Either has that big boom play, shout out the Costco guys, or he is going to have a bad play. Negative fantasy football points. He ranked 39th in true yards per carry last season, but he ranked 2nd in juke rate and 3rd in evaded tackles. And the fact that he is kind of this all or nothing running back on every single play is further kind of bit in the ass by the fact that they have the 31st ranked offensive line. This is a Seahawks team that, again, I get that they're going to want to run the ball, but there is no way without an injury that Kenneth Walker is going to be some crazy workhorse running back. Is the guy completely terrible? Of course not, but in Seattle, I just feel as though if he finishes the running back 19, 20 in PPR points per game like he did last season, would you be shocked at all? I wouldn't be, so I am not touching him right now with a 10-foot pole. At number 3, we got another running back that I am avoiding, and that is DeAndre Swift, running back of the Chicago Bears. Aggregate ADP running back 21 at pick 66. Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 26 at pick 92.5. Now, DeAndre Swift was a guy that last season, there were a lot of people very excited to draft DeAndre Swift because he went from the Lions, where it could have been a potentially crowded room with him and Jahmyr Gibbs, to become the lead back in Philadelphia, right? We all know the Philadelphia Eagles have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and DeAndre Swift had the 4th best run blocking rating last season. But if you actually drafted DeAndre Swift and you actually had to play him week in and week out, it was relatively frustrating. The guy ranked 51st in yards created per touch and 28th in yards per touch. He was the running back 20 last season and the running back 24 in PPR points per game. 16 games played with 15 starts, 229 carries, 14.3 per game, ranking 12th. 1,049 rushing yards, 65.6 per game, 5th. 49 targets, 39 receptions, 214 receiving yards, and 6 total touchdowns, 24th. So he goes from one of the best offensive lines in football, putting up pretty middling numbers, right? Running back 20 in PPR, 24 in PPR points per game, to now being inserted into an offense that, sure, their offensive line isn't a turnstile. I think you could very easily say that the Chicago Bears have a top half offensive line in the NFL, but the Eagles have one of the best, if not the best, last season. And now he is entering onto a team with a lot of competition around him. Do I think that DeAndre Swift is better than Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert? Yes, I do. But will I stand on top of the mountain and scream that DeAndre Swift is 100% better than those guys? The answer to that would be no, because I very much believe, based upon the build that DeAndre Swift has, that they are going to look to utilize other running backs in Chicago, and this could end up being a 3-headed dragon of death backfield, where if you draft them in best ball, and maybe every once in a while one of them has that great game, it's all fine and dandy, but when you're in your managed redraft league with your friends from college or your friends from the office, it could be bad because you have to actually decide when you want to play him. He might pop off one game and he's chilling on your bench. He scores 20 points. You go ahead and you're like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to start him. The Bears are looking solid. Caleb Williams is that and the other thing. And then the next game, Roschon Johnson's the guy or Khalil Herbert's the guy. I think DeAndre Swift is going to cause you to pull your hair out all season trying to figure out if you want to start him or not. And that is not something I am necessarily a fan of, and I'm definitely not a fan of as the running back 21 off of the board. Another interesting tidbit of information would be the fact that in college at USC, shout out the Trojans, both the football team as well as the people that make the condoms so that we don't have any pregnancy scares here. So DeAndre Swift is on a team with Caleb Williams, who at USC didn't really dump off the ball very often. DeAndre Swift is a guy that you would like to be catching a bunch of passes, get open in space, do the do-si-do around a couple of defenders, make them look silly, and have that huge reception. And I just don't really see that happening in Chicago. This is a crowded running back room with a quarterback that doesn't like to check down on a team with DJ Moore, who just got paid an insane amount of cash by the Bears a couple of days ago. They brought in Keenan Allen, who, while I don't like him at ADP, that dude sucks in targets with the efficiency that Mia Malkova sucks schlong. And they also have Roma Dunze, who has been looking great in training camp. They also have Cole Kmet. So there's a lot of guys that are going to be getting targets on a team with a quarterback that doesn't really check down. He's not Derek Carr out there. And DeAndre Swift last year didn't really look all that interesting to me. Sure, he had a couple of good games, but in Chicago, on a crowded backfield, crowded team overall, I just feel like DeAndre Swift's going to be a big old swing and a miss for fantasy football players this season. Speaking of swing and a miss at the running back position, we're going 3 running backs in a row, back-to-back championships, Kobe style. Tony Pollard, running back of the Le Titans, aggregate ADP running back 24 at pick 80, Underdog Fantasy ADP running back 29 at pick 100.5. My biggest issue with Tony Pollard is that based upon aggregate ADP in a lot of leagues, based upon the aggregate ADP right now things could change. ADPs can move, right? I'm not saying that the ADPs are going to be the same in late August as they are right now, because that would be stupid to say, because they always change a bunch. But right now, according to the aggregate ADP, you are going to be able to get Tyjae Spears 10, 15, 20, 25 picks later in certain drafts. How sure are we that Tony Pollard is better than Tyjae Spears? To me, the answer is I am not sure at all, because I actually believe that Tyjae Spears is better. Now, I fell for the Tony Pollard trap in 2023 fantasy football. He was the running back 14 in PPR, but he was the running back 23 in PPR points per game on an offense that was putting up huge point totals week in and week out. This was a team that was laying the SmackDown brother WWE style on defenses, jumping off the top ropes, hitting a frog splash on the defense's bitch ass. And guess what happened? Tony Pollard still wasn't very successful. On the goal line, you were better off handing the ball to that midget Deuce Vaughn, because he would have had a better chance of getting into the end zone compared to Tony Pollard. You could have handed the ball off to Tyrion fucking Lannister, and that dude has never seen a football in his life. And he would have had a better chance of getting in the end zone than Tony Pollard. It was so funny at times, and you just had to laugh, right? Laugh now, cry later, right? That's how it felt as a Tony Pollard drafter. You would watch the game, Tony Pollard runs into someone's ass, Mark Sanchez style. They give it to him again. He can't get in. They could have given it to him 4 times on the 1-yard line, and I swear to you, it felt impossible. Tony Pollard score a touchdown level impossible. Mission impossible for Mr. Tony Pollard. Again, was his season such a disaster last year? I guess not. But when you drafted him inside the first round and he was the running back 23, he left you feeling deserted. It felt like you were stuck on an island with Tony Pollard, because it was hard to sit him, because when you draft him that highly, it just hurts to bench that guy. But you just had to. You had to pull the plug. He had 252 carries, 7th at running back, 1,005 rushing yards, 12th at running back, 67 targets, 11th, 55 receptions, 8th. He had 311 receiving yards, 18th, and 6 total touchdowns, 24th. In terms of efficiency, It is so bad. Like, imagine what I'm going to say right now. Yards per touch. What do you think his number is? True yards per touch. 44th at running back. True yards per carry. 42nd. 0.7 fantasy points per opportunity. 50th. And he ranked 135th in EPA. Again, that joke I made about Tyrion Lannister maybe being a little bit more effective than Tony Pollard, that really was the case last year. 135th in EPA? Are you fucking kidding me? And now he's in a backfield with Tajay Spears. The Tajay Spears guy who would come in for Derrick Henry, not have a lot of a role for the first half of the game, but the Titans would be getting bent over a table, so they would have to throw Spears in. And in those scenarios, even with light workloads, Spears was successful. Now, was he a must-start running back every single week? Of course not, but he was successful. So this feels like a double-headed backfield committee on a team with the 30th ranked offensive line. Tony Pollard wasn't successful in Dallas with a significantly better offensive line. So what do you think is going to happen in Tennessee? And I understand, like, on paper, Tajay Spears isn't a goal line back, but he's probably better at it than Tony Pollard. If Tony Pollard was getting drafted later, I would understand it. I would understand taking the shot on him. Maybe you draft Tajay in one draft, Tony Pollard in the other one. But with this much of a discrepancy at ADP right now, there is no way I am going to be drafting Tony Pollard right now in 2024 fantasy football. Final player to discuss to let your idiot league mates draft is David Njoku, the chief tight end of the Cleveland Browns. Aggregate ADP tight end 10 at pick 85. Underdog Fantasy ADP tight end 11 at pick 101.7. Underdog Fantasy is the sponsor of today's video, so if you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy and click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious, you will receive a special pick plus up to $250 if you are a first-time depositor on Underdog Fantasy using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. If you don't know what Underdog Fantasy is, they are the best way to play best ball this summer for fantasy football. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, and no in-season management. Underdog automatically puts the highest scores into your lineup for you at the end of every single week. Underdog Fantasy's main tournament, $25 to enter, $1.5 million to first place. They have tournaments with as low buy-ins as $3 or $5. They release tournaments all summer long, so if this sounds fun to you, I will also be doing drafts live on the channel on the weekends, or maybe even in later August, just during the week, hop on. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure you guys check it out. Link in the video description. If you have a gambling problem, make sure you call 1-800-GAMBLER. So David Njoku was a guy that was on fire at the end of last season. He was like Mario when he... What does Mario even grab to turn on fire? See, maybe I'm just a fucking buffoon now, because I don't know what it's called. I sound like an idiot now, so I apologize for that, right? But he was on fire, NBA Jam style. You could easily, and he was also on fire in real life, and I'm glad that he ended up being okay from that, because that was a terrible situation. So maybe the analogy of him being on fire is fucked up, so I'm not going to say that again, but I probably accidentally will in the future, not thinking about the situation. But what I will say is he was really kind of a league winner for you. Him and Joe Flacco were cooking up a 5-star Michelin meal, diners, drive-ins, and dines with Guy Fieri, right? David Njoku was having a Thanksgiving feast weekly, and he was going crazy. Tight end 6 in PPR and tight end 7 in PPR points per game. 16 games played with 15 starts. He had 123 targets, as easy as 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, some Jackson 5 shit, right? 7.7 per game. Third at tight end, 81 receptions, 5.1 per game. Fifth, 882 receiving yards, 55.1 per game. Sixth, and 6 total touchdowns. Second, this all sounds fine and dandy, right? This sounds amazing. You can get him as the tight end 10 off the board. That is a steal, right? That's what the stats seem like. 7th in yards per team pass attempt. 5th in dominator rating. And 8th in fantasy points per route run. Now, if you actually put things into context, and based upon what I mentioned earlier, Joe Flacco was the reason why David Njoku's numbers sprouted like a beautiful flower. He ripped off 2 25-plus point PPR performances with Cool Joe Flacco and 5 15-plus point performances. But with Watson, if you try to go ahead and put a 17-game pace on the 5 full games that Deshaun Watson played with Njoku, Njoku would have had just 68 receptions compared to the 81 that he actually had for 598 yards, whereas he really had 882 because of Flacco. 3 touchdowns compared to 6. Now, is it a guarantee that those exact same numbers are going to be just instantly given to Njoku in 2024? Of course not. But it's not very promising when you look at those 5 games and you see that Njoku just couldn't get it up in those games, right? Whereas when Joe Flacco was under center, the guy was on Viagra, right? He was unstoppable. And it's just truly night and day with Joe Flacco versus Deshaun Watson. Now, I actually think Deshaun Watson will be better this season. But if he doesn't love, like, I know Deshaun Watson in real life, that bastard's like a pervert. He loves those tight ends, right? But on the football field, he doesn't. He's not going to feed David Njoku. So while I love the talent of Njoku, with Watson under center, it just feels like a dream to think if Njoku's going to have a great season. Plus, they brought in Jerry Jeudy. I've been like a generational Jerry Jeudy hater in fantasy football. I think he's a talented guy, just never worked in the NFL so far. And I don't really think he's going to have some huge year in Cleveland, but that's just another guy to take targets away from Njoku. So Njoku, despite literally winning people leagues last year, I don't think he's doing it this year with Deshaun Watson, maybe with famous Jameis under center, but root for injuries here. So if Jameis is fully, or not if Jameis, if Deshaun Watson's fully healthy all season, I think then David Njoku is going to end up as a straight up bust. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. Let me know down below in the comment section a player that you guys aren't drafting, a player that you are going to let your league mates draft so you don't have to draft them. If you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy and check out one of the videos if you haven't seen them on your screen right now. Love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.